There are moments in history when a single refusal reshapes the meaning of obedience, moments when silence carries more weight than 1,000 shouted commands. This story begins on a gray morning along the borderlines of a forgotten conflict day where exhaustion hung heavier than the smoke, and where orders were followed not out of loyalty, but fear. Among the soldiers of the 9th Regiment stood recruit Elias Thorne, a name that, at the time, meant nothing. He was quiet, disciplined, the kind of man who followed rules because he believed in structure and not in the men who abused it. His captain, Marcus Hale, was the opposite. Decorated, ruthless, and feared, Hale ruled not through respect, but through humiliation. He demanded obedience the way a tyrant demands tribute, with pride and cruelty as his weapons. That morning, during a surprise inspection before deployment, Captain Hale ordered something that crossed the line. He commanded his unit to fire upon a nearby civilian wagon, accusing it of aiding the enemy. But Elias saw the truth that the wagon belonged to refugees, not spies. The air froze as the captain barked, "Do it, Thorne, that's an order." But Elias didn't move. His rifle remained at his side. His silence, sharp as a blade, cut through the noise of marching boots and rustling banners. And in that stillness, a spark of defiance was lit, one that would ignite the entire base. The captain's face twisted in disbelief. His voice rose, thunderous. "I gave you an order, soldier." But Elias's gaze didn't flinch. The captain stepped closer, boots grinding into the mud, grabbing Elias by the collar. "You obey me, or you're done." Then it happened. Elias stepped back, tore himself free, and in a single, deliberate motion, he snapped the rifle's safety open and dropped it into the dirt. The sound, a dull metallic crack, echoed through the ranks. Every soldier froze. For the first time, Captain Hale had no words. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. The entire battalion stood paralyzed, eyes shifting between their captain and the man who had just defied him, not with violence, but with truth. In that moment, Elias Thorne had done the unthinkable. He had refused corruption in plain sight. No one spoke. The captain's hand trembled as he realized what had happened that in front of his own men. He lost his authority, his control, and perhaps, his dignity. He tried to recover, shouting, "You're finished, Thorne. Arrest this man." But no one moved. The sergeants exchanged glances. The corporals looked down. Not one soldier lifted a hand. Elias stood still, calm. "Sir," he said, his voice quiet but unwavering, "we swore to protect lives, not destroy them for your pride." The words struck deeper than any bullet. The refugees, hearing the commotion, had stopped their wagon and stared in disbelief. The wind carried Elias's voice across the field, clear and measured, a line that would soon be repeated across every tent in the base. By dusk, word had spread. A recruit had stood up to a captain and survived. The commanding general himself summoned both men for questioning. Elias did not defend himself. He only said, "If following an order means betraying what's right, then that order was never lawful to begin with." The general dismissed him quietly. Later that night, Captain Hale was stripped of his command, not for losing face, but for losing judgment. As for Elias, he wasn't punished. He was reassigned, silently, to a reconnaissance unit at the front. But the moral had already taken root among the men. The true discipline is not blind obedience, it is courage guided by conscience. Years passed. The war ended, leaving behind medals for some, silence for others. Captain Hale vanished into history, a name whispered with discomfort, a warning about pride unchecked. But Elias Thorne became something else entirely. His story was retold in every new platoon that trained under the flag. They called it the Day of the Refusal. Recruits spoke of the man who stood his ground without raising a weapon, who reminded soldiers that morality doesn't vanish beneath the weight of rank. Old veterans said that even long after the war, officers would pause before giving reckless orders, haunted by the memory of one man's calm defiance. Elias Thorne lived quietly after his discharge. When asked about that day years later, he simply said, "Obedience is strength, but only when guided by what's right." A soldier without conscience is a weapon without aim. And with that, he walked away from the interview, leaving behind a silence as profound as the one that had once fallen over the battlefield. A single refusal had turned into a legend, one that outlived the war itself.